We're very fortunate today to have with us the current leader of the official opposition, John Tory. John has had a storied career to date, and he's still pretty young. After graduating from law school in 1978, John's early career years were spent practicing law in Toronto. He served for 4 years as principal secretary to former Ontario Premier Bill Davis, from whom he learned many lessons about public policy, leadership, and community service. He then embarked upon a successful career as a CEO, first with Rogers Media and then Rogers Cable. Throughout his career, John has been heavily involved as a volunteer for many charitable causes. As the 2001 volunteer chair for the United Way of Greater Toronto, he spearheaded community fundraising drives that set a new record for money raised to help the homeless and less fortunate. John was also active as a volunteer with other organizations such as St. Michael's Hospital and the Salvation Army. He was honored in 2002 as Volunteer Fundraiser of the Year. An avid sports fan, he was a volunteer chairman of the Canadian Football League for 9 years, including 4 as league commissioner. He was first elected as an MPP in a by-election and became leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party in 2004. And of course, in 2003, he ran for mayor of Toronto, conducted a great campaign, ultimately not successful perhaps, although with what's happening in Toronto today, maybe it was. Please join me in welcoming John Tory.
Thank you very much. Well, Presidents Catherine and Alan and head table guests and ladies and gentlemen, Catherine, may I thank you very much for those very kind words of introduction. Now, I'll confess right from the beginning I was having one of those contact lens moments before I came into this room, so those of you who've worn contact lenses understand. As a result, I went into the bathroom and tried to fix it. I don't have them in, so I would have no idea whether there's anybody here or who you are if you are here. However, because I checked in advance, I do know that my wife, Barbara Hackett, is here, and I even know roughly where she's sitting. She's right about there somewhere. Could you stand up, Barb? She's been out on the campaign trail with me. I've been trying to convince her it's like a second honeymoon going around in a bus. I was having some success when we got to Niagara Falls the other day, honeymoon capital of the world. Went downhill when I told her last Thursday we were spending the night with Dalton and Howard, but never mind. I also know that my father is here, and I'm delighted he is, and I know my sister's here. And my sister Jennifer, she's a very big kahuna at the Royal Bank, and I wanted to tell you a story about that. Just sort of keeps your feet on the ground when you're in public life. I went, this is an absolutely true story. A few weeks ago, before the election started, I went to a bank branch in Scarborough, and the machine wasn't working, but it was a Saturday, and the branch was open, and all I wanted to do was deposit a check. And I went into the bank branch and asked if I could deposit the check, and they asked me if I had several pieces of identification. Now, this was not very good for my sort of political self-esteem, in that I was a man about to contest an election, and I kept producing one piece of ID after another. And finally, she looked at it and she said, "Oh, by any chance, would you be related to Jennifer Tory?" I said, "Yes, that was my sister." She said, "Oh, anything you like. What would you like to do, you know?" So, you just carry on. But in any event, I'm very proud of her and the success that she's had. What I'd like to talk to you today about, and I very much appreciate the invitation of these two clubs to ask me to speak, and your attending this lunch today. And I'd like to talk to you today about the Ontario we have and the Ontario that we deserve. The gap between the two, in my view, is a leadership gap, and I want to share some thoughts with you as to how we can close that gap. Because closing that gap, I think, will require leadership that both listens and acts. Leadership that is prepared to face tough issues and make difficult choices. Leadership totally committed to the success of enterprise and equally committed to the need for social progress. Now, the Ontario I know, and Catherine made mention of this, is the manufacturing heartland of Canada. It is also part of Canada's breadbasket. And whether you're talking about livestock or produce or the wine industry, our farmers have always put Ontario on the map. Ontario's greatest resource has always been its educated and hardworking people. Toronto is the centre of Canada's financial services industry, We're one of the most culturally diverse places in the world and the home of many of Canada's most popular tourist attractions. There is no reason why Ontario should not be a leader in Canada and around the world. And if we see our position slipping, as we do today, we should take a close look at why, because something is obviously standing in our way. That something is weak leadership. Despite all of the advantages that make Ontario great, despite our incredible promise, there are troubling signs for the Ontario economy today. 140,000 people have lost manufacturing jobs since January of 2005. Ontario's economic growth for 2007 is projected by the Bank of Nova Scotia to be dead last in the entire country. Earlier this year, Ontario's unemployment rate actually exceeded the national average for the first time in 30 years. That's right, 30 years. But statistics are just numbers. A politician can easily stand up and pull out this study or that statistic to hide behind. Here is something the numbers don't tell you. Behind every number, there are real people and real businesses. I've been to every corner of the province. Let me tell you about the Ontario that I see. The city of Cornwall has had some very difficult times in recent years. It made national headlines when the local Domtar plant closed and 910 people lost their jobs. These are talented, trained workers who were the source of Ontario's economic strength for so many years. Now, when you meet them, as I have done on a number of occasions, many will tell you that they've actually found new jobs. And they will tell you those jobs pay about half what they made before, and that their families are struggling. Meeting them, I saw what the human face of being dead last in economic growth really looks like. I met the owner of a small manufacturing company in Timmins recently. He told me that in 1 month, he'd had 5 visits from different inspectors and officials from the Ontario government. Worse still, some of the inspectors and regulators that visited him actually gave him contrary advice. I'm sure there's some of you in this room who've had that experience. That month, he said, he spent more time dealing with government officials than he did trying to strengthen his business. This is a man with the energy and the talent and the desire to expand his business and to create jobs in that community, but he can't. And that's not right. I've had these kinds of conversations far too many times. But the story that perhaps best illustrates how we could do better, much, much better, comes from Ontario's new diamond mining industry. In Ontario, we are so fortunate to have tremendous natural resources as well as the talented people to turn those resources into jobs and wealth. But it takes leadership to turn this potential into reality. Now, Dalton McGuinty was quick to attend the photo op at the groundbreaking for Ontario's first ever diamond mine. It promises hundreds of new jobs, including many for Aboriginal people, and billions in new investment, literally billions of dollars in new investment in a part of Northern Ontario that has struggled. Mr. McGuinty stood at that ceremony and said that Ontario's competitive taxes on diamond mining helped attract that multi-billion-dollar investment with those hundreds of jobs. And then just weeks later, Mr. McGuinty's finance minister stood in the legislature and more than doubled those same taxes in his budget. One leader in the diamond industry warned us that Ontario's first diamond mine might well end up being its last. Another said in news stories carried internationally that it was the kind of treatment that you would expect from a third world country. Ontario deserves a higher standard of leadership than that, and our economic future requires a higher standard of leadership than that. We simply must stop treating businesses as adversaries to be held in suspicion. This province is full of smart, hard-working, innovative people with the potential to power an economy that is second to none. They need a government that is their reliable, consistent partner and their booster, not a roadblock. But under the current government, taxes and regulations have continued to change, often in secret, usually without notice or consultation, and the assumption is that people will just get over it. I will change the way government creates rules and regulations and will reduce the overall burden of regulations by 25%, at least 25%. It has been done in the province of British Columbia, and it will be done here under a new progressive Conservative government. We cannot take for granted the strength of the financial services industry that creates so many jobs in Toronto. We cannot simply drift and hope for the best. I will lead a national push for a common securities regulator so that Canada can strengthen its position as an international financial centre. It is time for real leadership and real action for this industry by the province, namely this one, that should be leading in all of Canada. We will make long-term investments in our tourism and cultural sectors so that the number of people employed in these industries will continue to grow. I will not give up on the United States market as the current government seems to have done. Now, Dalton McGuinty promised not to raise taxes, only to break that promise in his first budget. That broken promise had consequences for working families and for Ontario itself as a place to invest and to create jobs. I will reduce the overall tax burden. Upon taking office, we will move immediately to repeal the so-called health tax and return that money to the hard-working people who have earned it. We will start with those who need help the most by eliminating that tax on January the 1st, 2008 for people earning under $30,000 per year, those who can afford it least of all. The tax was created in a way that punished lower income people. It made them pay a higher rate of tax than other income brackets, and that is something that will be corrected first because it was wrong to begin with. The tax was wrong because it was a broken promise tax. The way it was done was wrong because it was regressive. I will cap residential property assessment increases at 5% per year. I will reduce business education taxes, and we will eliminate the capital tax to encourage investment and to grow the economy. Ontario has the people and the resources to be a leader in economic growth and job creation. We should be second to none. But when it comes to ensuring Ontario has the prosperity it needs, there is a big gap between the Ontario that we have and the Ontario that we deserve. If we're going to close this gap, we need new leadership. Now, there's a very powerful reason why we need to close this gap. And yes, it's about investment and it's about jobs, but there's something even more important at stake. And that is that a prosperous economy gives us the resources to help those in need. When the economy grows, government revenues grow with it. When government revenues grow, we can invest more in health and education and helping the disadvantaged. I've seen remarkable compassion when I talk to people all across Ontario, but we have to do more, much more than we're doing to turn that compassion into action. We need new leadership in this province in order to ensure that each tax dollar is spent responsibly. We must put an end to the kind of waste and mismanagement which has become embedded in the culture of government, especially these past 4 years. I will put my business experience to work, dramatically increasing accountability, spending smarter, and ending practices like the irresponsible year-end spending with so-called extra money. I've never heard of this concept of extra money. It's going to come to an end, that sort of irresponsible practice of rushing money out the door without accountability, because it's just plain wrong. Our healthcare system is a blessing that is too easy to take for granted. Our universal, publicly funded healthcare system carries with it a promise. No matter where you live or what you can afford, when you or someone you love falls ill, our healthcare system will be there for you. But when government does not manage healthcare properly, the gap between the promise of our healthcare system and the reality of our healthcare system only grows. Right now in Ontario, 1 million adults and 130,000 children cannot find a family doctor. Many of these people are seniors. Many of them are newer Canadians. 1 million of our fellow Ontario citizens who cannot find a family doctor. And yet, once again, it's not really the numbers that tell the whole story. Let me tell you again about the Ontario that I see when I travel. You may have seen me make reference in the debate to a woman by the name of Etta Young from Cobourg. She has been advertising in the local newspaper for a family doctor. What I didn't say during the broadcast of the debate is that Etta Young is 91 years old. Two women I met in London about 10 days ago told me, one a young mum and another one a senior citizen, told me about filling out application forms for family doctors. And then being told when they submitted those application forms that they were going into files with thousands of other forms, and that those two women, among all the thousands of other people, shouldn't expect to hear back. Application forms for a family doctor. We simply must do better than that. Our government, when elected, will invest $400 million new dollars every year by the end of our mandate to recruit and retain more doctors and nurses. We will use that money to help defer debt repayment for graduating medical students who stay and practice here in the province of Ontario. We will provide flexible retirement arrangements for older doctors. And we will put a full court press on recruiting back home to the province of Ontario the more than 9,000 Canadian-trained doctors now practicing in the United States. I will go to the United States to persuade them personally because that's what a leader should do. Quite frankly, I can't think of a better use of a premier's time. I will open up our healthcare system to partnerships with the private sector in areas where they can provide quality service at a competitive cost to the taxpayer, all under the single-payer system where you never need to pay with anything other than your OHIP card. My priority, and let me be very clear about this, is on getting care for patients. I will not let political posturing get in the way of getting people off waiting lists and out of pain. If it's quality care and you need only present your health card, I will welcome those entrepreneurs who will provide that care and accept that card that we all carry in our pockets together. Let me tell you something else that makes me very proud about being an Ontarian. We got a very important balance right. We built a society based on the fundamental principles of equal justice, common standards, and the rule of law. And yet at the same time, within those common standards, we became the world's most multicultural nation, serving as a testament to the Canadian commitment to diversity. Supporting inclusion and fairness for minorities didn't happen by chance. It happened because we are a tolerant, inclusive people, and because we had leaders committed to social progress. Whether it was the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or funding for Catholic schools, there was always a debate, there was always a little worry. But these things are part of our society today, and we are the better for it. Now, I know that my position in including all faiths, not just one, in the public system, bringing other faiths into the public school system, has prompted plenty of debate, and that's fair. For me, this is a fundamental issue of fairness. There are two viable positions: fund all faiths or fund none. I have chosen inclusion, as I will always do. Now, Ontario is known as a peaceful and civil society, where despite there always being more work to do, we made steady progress in ensuring that the benefits of our prosperity are shared. I've long believed that we have to do more to help those who are disadvantaged in our society. Catherine mentioned some of the work that I was privileged to do as a private citizen. Whether it's the quality of housing or access to community services or availability of job opportunities, I believe there is still a gap between the haves and the have-nots in our province, and our platform makes firm commitments to addressing it. I said at the Board of Trade 2 weeks ago that we simply must decide that we're going to revitalize the far too numerous disadvantaged communities that we have allowed to grow in our major cities. Now, this means addressing physical infrastructure like housing and community facilities. The state that these are in today should be a source of embarrassment. But it also means addressing the human conditions which we see for far too many of our fellow citizens, many of them newer Canadians, who aren't getting the support they need so they can make their contribution. Make no mistake, they want to contribute. They are able to contribute, and they are not asking for a handout. They are simply asking for a hand up, a mentorship, a homework club for their kids, or an English course for themselves. I will lead, and I will get results for these fellow citizens of ours because it is right and because it is what a real leader should do. Now, in many of these same neighborhoods, isolations and breakdowns in our system have created breeding grounds for gangs and for drugs and for gun crime. One of the saddest parts of my job has been to attend the funerals of young people shot and killed on the streets of our city. I've met with the families at those funerals and elsewhere and been told they feel abandoned. They've told me that they're frustrated with our justice system. They see the vandals and the gun-toting drug dealers back in their neighborhoods hours after they're arrested. They will tell you a statistic that they know all too well. 7 out of 10 people charged with murder in Toronto last year were out on bail or probation at the time of their arrest. This is one of many indicators of a system that has gone seriously wrong. I stood at the casket of young Jordan Manners, a young man shot dead in his school, a young boy shot dead in his school, and when his mother asked me to promise to do what I could so that her son didn't die in vain, I said that I would do as she asked. Keeping that promise is about fixing these neighborhoods, and it's about helping those kids and families. but it's also about focusing people's attention on the breakdowns in our justice system so that we can fix it. And I can tell you right now, I will speak out on this issue today and tomorrow and every day of this campaign and every day thereafter, and I won't just be speaking about the breakdown. As the Premier of this province, I will be doing something about it as well, because it simply has to be fixed. I will put an end to the catch-and-release justice system that has flourished under Dalton McGuinty. Unacceptable bail and sentencing and plea bargaining deals for dangerous criminals will be brought to an end. I will make that system more transparent. There will be regular reports on the number of bail and sentencing deals taking place and the number of people who are released only to reoffend. We should know that information. We will order an automatic inquest any time that someone is out on bail or probation or parole and causes a death. If you cannot walk down the streets of any community in this province without fear of being mugged or assaulted or shot, then yes, that is a breakdown in justice that threatens our quality of life. When you cannot count on the law to protect your safety, to protect your property, and to treat you the same way as everybody else, then the foundation of civil society is diminished. Now, just this past weekend, I went down to the town of Caledonia, as I have 8 times now. I met with several local families who've been living in fear for 577 days, while an ongoing Aboriginal land occupation has torn apart an entire community. People have been assaulted. Acts of vandalism have been common. Schools have been closed. Businesses damaged. Let me tell you about the Ontario that I saw in Caledonia. It's an Ontario where frightened people look you in the eye and they tell you that the rules and the laws that all of us in this room take for granted just don't seem to apply there anymore. Right now, in our province, our fellow Ontarians have been living in the shadow of razor wire fences for some time. And our fellow Ontarians have been called upon to show so-called passports just to access their own homes. The current government has done virtually nothing about this travesty of justice. As Premier, I would stand up for the rule of law. One law for all. Just as I reject two-tier medicine and two-tier religious school funding, I also reject two-tier justice. While I can tell you that I feel very strongly that we have let down our Aboriginal people over decades on land claims and other issues, and that I intend to do much, much better working with the federal government and anybody else I can to do better for our Aboriginal people, we will not solve that problem by letting people, any people, ignore the rule of law. The current Premier turns a blind eye to protesters who issue illegitimate so-called building permits to force payments from people who have clear title to land and who have sought and received all required approvals. We must clarify the laws so that people know their rights and so that those who choose to occupy land, any people who choose to occupy land, understand that there are consequences that follow that choice. The amended law that we will bring in when we form the government will respect the valid interests of all sides, will protect innocent bystanders, and provide a clearer legal framework for the police. These are steps that any real leader would take to preserve and protect those institutions that lie at the heart of our civilized democratic society. I will lead in this area where others have refused to do so. I want to be a leader for Ontario that people can look up to, one whose word is his bond, who will never stop listening to them. The notion that your word is your bond, I think for most of us, is something that is put into us from the earliest days. It certainly was in my home. I've said before, I remember going with my grandfather. He had a trucking business in downtown Toronto, to his garage, and I used to go there many Sundays because it was a place that as a young boy you'd be fascinated to go. And I saw him do business by shaking someone's hand. And my concept of what you're doing when you're campaigning for public office is you are shaking the hand of the voters. You shake some of their hands physically, but when you make a commitment to them, you're shaking the hand of every voter and saying, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. And so that your word is your bond, and you must never stop listening to the voters, because they always have something to say and you can always learn. I want to live in an Ontario that captures the promise that I see all around us, the equality of opportunity, the benefits of enterprise, and they're so fantastic, the benefits that enterprise can continue to bring to this province, and the effectiveness of our health and education systems for all to access. I want to build an Ontario where no poverty is permanent, where our shared values and common stability mean that there are no strangers. An Ontario where the chance for improvement and a better future is the birthright of all. As a progressive conservative, I believe in an Ontario where freedom and responsibility are partners in shaping the future that we need. As a progressive conservative, I believe that economic growth and social progress go hand in hand. and that you cannot have one without the other. The challenge we face embraces the courage to listen and the determination to lead. Ontario needs leadership that will face up to the tough choices and does not fear the tough choices. Every Ontarian has the right, I think, to aspire to something more for his or her family, for his or her community, or for his or her province. That's the promise of Ontario. It's our duty to protect and to strengthen and to enhance that promise so that Ontario can lead once again. That's why I want to be the Premier of this province. Thank you very much.
Alan Odette, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto, will express our appreciation.
On behalf of the Empire and Canadian Club memberships, along with our live audience today, I'd like to thank John Tory for a speech that had all the characteristics he brings to his role as leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario, some of which are not being afraid to approach difficult issues while clearly laying out your vision with passion and clarity. It was fascinating to hear from John today, as I expect, no doubt, we'll be fascinated to hear from the Premier next week when he's here at a lunch the two clubs will co-host. There's nothing like an election to provide fodder for great speeches and keep all the political junkies in our audience happy. On behalf of our clubs, again, I'd like to just thank you, John, again for being here and wish you continued success over the next couple of weeks as you finish out the campaign. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alan. Every year, the Empire Club of Canada Foundation publishes a book of that year's speeches. John, we'd like you to accept a copy of our book from the previous year, knowing that your address today will be published in this year's volume. As well, we have a copy for you of Who Said That, a book we produced to capture the most memorable thoughts, quotes, and anecdotes of our first 100 years.